Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Shonkoff. I teach in the Center for Jewish Studies at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. And I want to share some thoughts with you today, to which I am giving the title Koved and Koved. So amidst all the diversity of religious and spiritual traditions in the world, one of the strongest points of agreement among them is that self-absorption cuts us off from what is divine. Radical mystics who seek to dissolve their egos in the heart of all of existence, religious activists who sacrifice personal power and possessions in order to address the suffering of others, both associate a decentering of the self with a recentering of the sacred. And this is not a call for self-castigation or a rejection of the importance of self-care. This is really a decentering of the small self, the ego, a liberation from me versus you mentalities, from the futilities of fight or flight, from our addictions to dopamine rushes and cheap validation. It's a way to return to the expansive self where there is love, compassion, wisdom, and wakefulness. The German Jewish philosopher Martin Buber located the divine in moments when we see beyond ourselves and behold the concrete presence of others in the world. There's revelation, he said, where the other leibt mir gegenüber, bodies forth over against me, and where I'm within the other's Atemkreis, the radius of their breath. This is hardly what we're going for these days in a time of social distancing and self-quarantine. In the past weeks, I've been thinking about ways that this pandemic can totally amplify our egos. Amid social isolation, fear of physical harm, and a scary scarcity of resources, and all of this blaring at us constantly through the 24-hour news cycle, there's so much that is pushing us to just hold our breaths, wall up inside of ourselves, and just spin out in our heads. Of course, there's a very real need to protect ourselves and our loved ones, to track our resources and so on. But I do wonder, and I fear, what this exceptional plunge into the isolated, separated self is doing to us spiritually. Now, we could definitely just say that a pandemic is no time for spirituality. We have bigger fish to fry right now. But this pandemic, much like the climate crisis looming on the horizon, is showing us that we actually can't afford to cast aside the spiritual wisdom of self-transcendence. We can't afford to have 8 billion egos crying out every day that we are separate units, that we ought to just look out for ourselves and what's ours. Rumbling beneath all of those egocentric mirages is reality itself, who's whispering and sometimes screaming something very different. Everything is interconnected. Human beings, along with plants, animals, water, soil, and atmosphere, are all inextricably bound together, economically and ecologically, geopolitically and biologically, molecularly, energetically. And this is the ego's worst nightmare, but perhaps the most essential insight right now. The kind of radical redemptive action that we need to take as a species right now demands more from us than our age-old tricks of fight or flight. The conditions right now of isolation, fear, and scarcity associated with this pandemic, not to mention the climate crisis, makes it harder than ever to look beyond ourselves, and yet even more necessary. From this perspective, the techniques and the insights of spirituality are hardly irrelevant. As a Jew, I think in the languages of Judaism. So this is a time to affirm in our thoughts and in our actions that all beings are worthy of kavod, a Hebrew term that means respect or dignity, but relates etymologically to terms for gravity and weightiness. To say that all beings are worthy of kavod is to affirm that all beings are weighty. I am and we are not the centers of gravity around which others orbit. The egocentric view of the universe is morally and spiritually wrong. In the ever sarcastic tongue of Yiddish, the term Koved, just the Eastern European pronunciation of kavod, can refer to a kind of pompous, self-aggrandizing special treatment. Regarding some of the more narcissistic personalities in academia, for example, my teacher, Paul Mendez-Flor, said to me once, all human beings deserve kavod, respect. And then there are some human beings who demand koved, special treatment, aggrandizing. The COVID-19 pandemic is no time for koved. We need kavod. This is a time to break out of egocentrism and to thereby reconnect with the world itself. Actually, as the sages of the Mishnah teach, ha-koved motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam. Koved, self-aggrandizement, alienates a person from the world. We need to shift from self-centered koved to world-centered kavod. So how might we do this right now? And I think all of us, including myself, are trying to figure out how to live well and serve well right now. So here's some ideas. First of all, sheltering in place is one of the most important and selfless things we can do right now. It's, after all, not just a matter of personal protection, but a genuine sacrifice for the common good. I think we all are starting to see that now. In the meantime, instead of just withdrawing into ourselves while sheltering in place, we can stay connected with friends, family, and community members, making sure that everyone, including ourselves, is feeling seen, taken care of, and loved. But this pandemic is tragically also exacerbating the already grave disparities of privilege in our society. Those of us who have a stable shelter in which to shelter in place, those of us who remain employed or have other sources of financial security during this time, those of us with a personal computer, phone, and internet connection, we can acknowledge and use this privilege. We can run essential errands and deliver resources for people who can't or shouldn't right now. We can donate money to bail relief programs to help some of the most vulnerable individuals in our society get out of crowded, unsanitary, and inhumane jails while they await trial. We can support the laborers who are resisting the dangerous conditions imposed on them by their corporate employers, such as the Amazon workers who are striking right now in response to unsanitary treatment. Those who normally employ a gardener, a childcare worker, a housekeeper, who depends on the payment from you, you might consider continuing to compensate them during this time. We can push our government representatives to take actions that serve and protect those with less privilege. These are just a few ideas for how those of us with relative privilege right now might overcome our self-centered Koved in service of clear-sighted Koved, to make sure that we are staying attuned and responsive to the world of which we are merely just a part. I'm one of those people who believes that spiritual practices can help in this necessary process of self and world transformation. Any ritual worthy of its name has the power to nudge us out of our self-absorption, to open up the small ego into the expansive self where the heart of all of existence is beating. Jews are right now in the middle of the week of Passover, the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of leaving Egypt. We're called upon to not only remember, but to rekindle the exodus from Mitzrayim, from the narrow straits, into the merchav of Midbar, the expansiveness of desert, where revelation continues to reverberate if we listen. Ancient Midrash underscores that the Torah was revealed in the desert precisely because desert is open, public, and ownerless, and instructs us to make ourselves like the desert. Only then are we receptive to the sacred. In the Jewish calendar, the path from Passover to Shavuot, from the celebration of leaving Egypt to the celebration of the Sinai revelation, is 7 weeks. Traditionally, Jews count the Omer during this time. We count each of these 49 days between Passover and Shavuot, marking and perhaps facilitating our growth from narrowness to expansiveness. This year, by all educated accounts, the full 49-day period of this counting will take place in the shadow of the pandemic. This is a time for us then to actively melt the boundaries of our narrowness, to move from self-centeredness to self-transcendence, from Koved to Koved. May we hear and respond to what is beyond ourselves, even while taking care of ourselves. May we work together to see that maleh chol haaretz kevodo, that the whole world is filled with divine weightiness. May we be safe, loving, and wise. Take care.